everybody, welcome back to the Bill and Ray Show. I'm out in the torch shop, gonna make another marble. Got a couple things laid out here, some prep work done. But this is kind of simple marble, but something a little different always. So I'm gonna start off with my build rod. Gonna make kind of a chisel end, and we're gonna proceed from there. Light the torch. I'll start cleaning up the end of this clear rod. Today's little additional item. I've got a file here, or really a rasp, a very coarse rasp, and I'm going to try and use that to make some texture. Or at least maybe some bubble pattern. Not sure what it's going to do. I'm kind of looking forward to warming up here a little bit. Wanted to get out here before the weather got too warm today, but I don't think that's going to happen. I'm starting off, my hands are kind of cold and everything feels a little slippery. It's one thing about doing the glass work is you need clean hands. You can't have lotions or any oils or whatever on your hands. You wind up having kind of dry skin that's sometimes a little hard to grab a hold of things. So as sometimes is the case, this initial step is going to kind of determine some of the aspects of how large this marble gets. So I want to start off with something that's not too large, and hopefully the marble doesn't turn out a real odd size. Maybe might be a small marble by standards of what I've been doing. I've been doing most of these marbles have been right around 2 inches, a little over 2.1 inches or so. I tend to get into kind of a pattern where I get fairly consistent with certain build size, but when I try a different setup to start with, it's hard to visualize how that size is going to grow through the process. But there's a couple steps later on that I can kind of work with the size there, change it up a little. I'm trying to clean up as we melt back this rod. We'll get the big flame going here and get this gather built up. It helps to have a good size chunk of glass to start with, even if you're going to taper it out or only work on the outer end of it. With this type of marble, because the front lens is going to be half the marble, basically, and really the clear glass on the interior is the bulk of the marble. It's important to build up a good start to that bulk. So sometimes the case here when I start out with the gather, then I need to let this settle down for a moment so that I can get some shaping done. So just to kind of keep an eye on what I'm trying to end up with. Some of this is going to look a little familiar. Okay, now I've got these mashers that kind of do a taper effect. Let's see if I can start coaxing this. So I want kind of a narrow path inside this Vortex marble with kind of a deep canyon wall effect. So try and kind of start out visualizing what's going to happen here in the core. And it's going to go through a lot of steps here, so this just kind of gets an idea going. Do a little pull out on the end here. It's kind of hard to shape this end, but we'll get a little better idea of our focus. Okay, well, that's a start. So we've got to somehow apply this file to try and get some pattern effect on here. So I'm going to try and heat up one side. I should have tried to clean up this rasp before I used it for this, but alright, so the idea here that I had we're going to fume it at this stage. We'll do some gold. Alright. Now we're going to do round dots. So that's going to fill in over these dimples, creating little bubbles. So we do kind of large spots of glass, and then some smaller. Okay, now I've got some of this Neptunium. I'm just going to add a little bit of this stuff along these edges. And then I've got there's this purple lilac. I'm going to do some little accent colors. Kind of subtle. Not touching down here very well. Fuming, particularly gold fuming, sometimes if you don't have the glass hot enough, it doesn't really stick. It kind of pulls right off. Alright, that's layer one. So the concept was just kind of get this wedge shape started and then build out the two sides and kind of let this evolve into a large cone. We're trying to get this to melt in a natural sort of way and see if we can minimize shaping this. Alright. Need a different fume layer. So we'll drop down to kind of a reducing flame a little bit. And I'm trying to build out these sides, so we're going to do some lines. And I'll heat that in. So this isn't a pattern that I've done before exactly, so let's see how this goes. So try not to overheat it. And I didn't get that fume all the way burned out in those valleys, but I'm going to run with that because the next thing I'm going to do is some gold fume. You build up these layers, it gets a little hard to tell exactly what the fume is doing. So now I'm going to just add glass in those valleys and maybe across this top. Okay, so we're slowly trying to build this out where it's more of a cone all the way around. So in other patterns I've done similar to this, I make a pretty flattened field to start with, do just one layer of fume maybe, and then some backing color, and then build that out with clear glass behind the background color. This one I'm trying to do some layers to build up that space. I'm going to do this a little differently. Okay, let that cool down a moment. And back to another silver fume. So just kind of trying to build those faces up with some pattern glass and fuming. That's probably about all the layers I can really get away with there. Okay, once again, we'll let that settle down. And we'll go ahead and try and shape this up. A little flashback heat there. I'm going to go ahead and give this a little bit of a turn to it. Alrighty. Next step, I think I'm going to use a little frit. Do some blue-green frit. I really like this stuff in the background. Let that melt in on its own, not trying to do any marbling here. Kind of let that settle for a moment. And that's kind of the interior design here. We'll heat this end and taper this point. Okay, well, take a breather here for a moment. Get out my mug, see if I can read my directions and get the design here straight. I hope everybody out there is doing good. We're keeping it together here. Spring has been keeps getting some moisture, which is a good thing, but it's a little almost like June gloom here. So I'm going to do some backing with dark amethyst. And this first pass kind of helps define the break point between the colored section and the front lens. So we're coming up on Memorial Weekend here for us. If you're watching this in the future. We had a store, our local town here in Corvallis, Montana, had a pretty big deal having their Memorial Day parade. So we would have our store all decked out and ready to rumble. And you'd have these big crowds of people come down for the parade. And they're all filing back to their cars and they're looking at us like, what are you guys doing there? We tried it several years. Didn't really generate much business. kind of a letdown to have that many people come around, but you know, it's exposure, I guess. I just drove by that location this morning. We were off to a doctor's appointment up in Stevensville and had a lot of fond memories of that place. So this is kind of a big cone. You have to do a little tweaking here to shorten it up. Sometimes I just do this, just let that end wrap itself around. Okay, so we can kind of modify this. We're generating a bit of a two-step cone. Yeah, it's a little shorter. Okay, now this transition area, we're going to do some silver fume on here. It's kind of a fresh silver on there, and put this on really heavy. Now, even though that dark amethyst is not a very dark color, so you're going to be able to see some light through it, these fume layers, when you see the lighting on the back, it acts like, it's a reflective layer, so it acts like a barrier, but light is still actually going through it. But visually, it'll make it more solid under normal lighting coming from where you're viewing from, if that makes any sense. Okay, we start putting down our clear, leaving that end open. I don't want to drop that clear glass over the tip, or you'll lose your deep vortex effect. Trying to put this down in little wiggles here to make sure we push the hot glass into that crevice and hopefully push the air out. But because of that fume layer, this kind of makes this almost like looks like a welding process with little stacks of pools. With stuff like this, you want some of that torch flame deflecting onto your workpiece. It's mostly focused on the clear rod that I'm melting into here, but you want some heat deflected onto the base. Seems like you go around and round and round. It takes forever to get to the end. So I kind of almost went around the corner and constricted this end out here. Because that'll be a whole section that when the lens is building up, it'll push that back and push it back and out, and then we'll tear off that raggedy edge. this front tip, lift that very end open, that will kind of close this off. I mean, not close it off, but push it back right around that. Sharpen that tip. And we can fill in the rest of this. Getting a little short here. Alright, that's a bunch of glass. Let that cook in for a little bit. I'll reach down here and get my coffee cup. I'm doing some work on another kiln I have in here that I kind of built from scratch. I'm trying to make a metal structure to go around it. It's been just kind of a pile of insulating bricks and some ceramic wool around it. And I had it set up on a base with some layers of insulation and things, and when I moved it the other day to work on it, evidence it was kind of hot underneath that kiln where it was setting. So that was a little bit shocking, and glad I didn't have any problem with that. But now I've got in the process of building it out, I want to hopefully design something that's got some airflow underneath it so it doesn't overheat whatever it's sitting down on. Shape is a little wibbly wobbly here. Trying to get it hot enough so it'll flow on its own. And then we'll come in here with the marble mold and just let it set in here and just kind of gently let it run around a little bit. Get it a little bit smoother. Okay, once again, we're going to let it chill for a moment. It's nice to have enough of a rod left here at this point to give you a little bit of a balance on my silly stand that I have here. My soup can roller. It's got a whole bunch of weights inside there. It stays put pretty good. I didn't think about it rolling so much as initially I just wanted someplace to set this down. So if I have to go out and swap out the propane bottle or some horrible scenario like that, I've got a place to just set it. But it works as a good roller. Alright, we're going to move on to drawing some lines of color on the back side. And I'm going to start off with Peacock. More power, Scotty. Okay, then I've got a couple other odd colors. We've got some green. This is a green out of China, I believe. I was given a couple little samples. And I think when I've used this before, it's run pretty transparent in this application. So I don't expect to see a whole lot out of this, but that's why I fume that underlying layer, because it'll give some light coming up through these pale colors. It gives you kind of a little window into the inner workings. And then get that off my sleeve. Some pink slime, I think this is. Is that right? You bet. And again, depending on flame chemistry and temperatures, this may or may not show much color or show much opacity. But actually, I'm not positive if I've used this on the outside like this before. And I tried to get a stringer that's fairly thick. Hopefully lay down enough. But sometimes it's just a matter when it's thinned out, it's just pulled out so thin and just doesn't have enough mass to show much color. All right. Yeah, quite a few little bubbles in there. We'll see how this turns out. Sometimes after heating and raking and all that sort of thing, may chase some of those bubbles away. Alright, once again, time to settle down. Okay. Okay, start getting this front lens pushed in. Even at this stage, it still has got a bit of that wedge shape to it. Again, it's getting pretty toasty. Trying to rotate the punty in my right hand and the feed stock in my left hand. Trying to keep those kind of just rotating together. Don't want a whole bunch of twisty stuff going into the clear mix here. Alright, let's get this cut loose. So I'm just applying pressure on the left hand side. And I just let that punchy ride without strain. Okay, trying to remove a chunk of the clear and just skim that colored line. Well, I don't think this came together quite the way I had it in my head, but that as soon as you get going with something, then I think, oh yeah, that's right. That's what it's going to look like. So, still a little different than what I've done in the past. And I'm happy with the way it's come together so far. Gotta keep my expectations in check, I guess, on this marble. Trying to pull off, especially all those different fume cycles. You get a lot of spillover fume that contaminates the glass out here on the clear side. Okay, I think I got it mostly done. Takes a lot of heat to get through that much glass. Still trying to kind of fight that wedge shape, transitioning to a spherical or a cylindrical shape, now transforming into a spherical shape. Alright, takes all that time and all that effort to get the heat built up in there to shape it a little bit. And then the next phase, you want to lose a lot of that heat. Which seems a little counter to what you think you want, but you can only work on part of the marble at a time. Like this, you're hanging on to one side, but that side you're hanging on to needs to be pretty solid. If you get the entire piece heated through and through, it gets really hard to control. Getting our first peaks into the interior. Yeah, some of these colors, one reason we don't use certain colors on the back side, you get some of these little bubble trouble things, so this back side is a little messier than I'd like. I had to go in and fiddle around with some bubbles. kind of just use heat and gravity, let it fall back on itself and condense. And fast spin this to pull the circumference out. And we'll drop in kind of level here. We'll do a couple odd shape gyrations here. So now we got this big fat dimple off on the end. I'm trying to keep the focal point of the vortex inside, keep its geometry intact as much as we can. So we'll let this hopefully melt back on its own, at least partially. Okay, now I gotta hit the mold and get that end to pull in. Oh, shoot. Well, that doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. I'm going to try and reattach here. Okay, well, we're not quite on center here, but hopefully we're back in business. Just trying to keep it real. It does happen on occasion. I'm trying to put too much pressure on it. Or bumped it, or somehow that. Usually that punchy, as long as the glass is pretty hot, it's pretty flexible and withstands quite a bit of abuse. But now I'm gun shy about messing with it too much. But it's at this step, this punchy setup, that I really want to do the bulk of the shaping. At least it broke off when it was in the mold, so it wasn't rolling around on the table or dropping on the floor. That's one of those things that's like, oops, well, cut. But anytime you have to do kind of a emergency attachment like that, it's probably not the best attachment either. But the general rule with punties is the hotter things are, the safer you are. Did introduce quite a lot of wiggles and wobbles that it took a little bit of time to work out. Just a little bit of wrinkles. So you start looking at the reflections, trying to figure out just how bad the wobbles are. And then we're just going to spin this up and lose some heat. Back in and do a flame polish. Alright, we made it through that phase. Well, I'd like to say it turned out exactly the way I wanted it to, but it didn't. It did something different. Okay, so remove this janky punchy. I want to remove any funky glass here in the end. even see it doing that, but made a little bump on the very end. So mostly when it does that, we want to just heat that to get that to melt together. And we need to wait a moment. Let that kind of skin over. Get it down gently and spin through that end. Do that by kind of going up and down. That gets that edge. Because this marble's too big to sit inside this marble mold. It's sitting on the rim, which is what I want. Okay, now looking at some of these reflections, this rim is going to have a little wiggles to it, I think. It's not going to really be practical trying to get all the wrinkles out. We'll try and smooth this out. This should be about it. You just don't want to get in a rush at the very end. So many glass projects, if you just spend a few more moments with it, really clean it up. Pretty close. It's got great depth, interesting effects going on. A little bit of opacity here on these colors on the back side, so I think that'll look pretty nice. Okay, we're going to get one more flame polish here. We should be pretty good. Wow. Thank you anyone who's still hanging in there watching this video. We certainly appreciate you guys spending your valuable time checking out some of our glass work. Hoping this provides some value to people. As Monty Python would say, and now for something completely different. Kind of heat that a couple of cycles until we see a pretty clean reflection. Ah, we made it. Little dicey moment there. A little punchy juggle. It's okay. That hasn't happened to me for a little while. Wow, yeah, that's pretty. So, some lovely marble. Pop this into the oven. Yeah, exciting to see that one come out in the morning. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. We really have fun doing all this, sharing some of our silly life. And we hope the very best for you and your family, you and yours. Be kind to yourself and to those around you. And we will catch you on another adventure, another day next time.